Her choir rehearsed the Silent Canticle. By the final performance, their mouths kept moving, but there was nothing left to hear. Sound is the most intimate of the senses. It enters the body without permission. There is no reflex to close the ear the way the eye can close against something it doesn't want to see. Sound arrives through bone and fluid and the particular receptivity of the inner ear, and it fills the space you occupy with someone else's intention. Most traditions of sacred music understand this. They have always understood that a song can do something to you that is not merely aesthetic, that certain combinations of tone and interval create states the body would not reach on its own. Most of these traditions use this knowledge to elevate, to open, to bring the listener into contact with something larger than the ordinary register of daily experience. Some music is built to do the opposite. The hymnal that Clara found in the abandoned choir loft of St. Bartholomew's Episcopal had been there for 40 years, gathering the particular dust of a space that no one had entered with any regularity. The sheet music inside it was titled Silent Canticle, and its lyrics were in no language she recognized and produced when she tested a single phrase at her piano. No audible sound whatsoever. She brought it to her choir. She should not have brought it to her choir. Clara Sorensen had been director of the Harwick Community Choir for 11 years, in a small Massachusetts town that took its community music seriously in the way of places that have limited other civic entertainments, and have redirected that energy into something genuinely sustained. The choir had 42 members. They were not professionals, but they were committed, and under Clara's direction they had developed a quality of ensemble sound that produced, in the acoustics of Harwick's Congregational Church, something that occasionally surprised even the most experienced members in the moment of its production. She found the hymnal in the choir loft of St. Bartholomew's, which had been deconsecrated in 1982 and repurposed as a community art space that had never quite found its community, and which Clara had been given access to for set storage, because the choir's current venue had limited storage capacity. She went in on a Tuesday afternoon, navigating by flashlight through a building whose electrical work hadn't been assessed since the repurposing, and found herself in the choir loft because the door at the top of the narrow stairs was open, and she was, by professional habit, curious about the acoustic properties of an untouched historic choir space. The loft was intact. The original fixed pews in 2 facing rows, the music stands, the organ console at the far end, all present, all covered in the specific quality of dust that accumulates in a sealed space over 40 years, all undisturbed. On the nearest music stand, as though left for a rehearsal that had simply never been scheduled, was a hymnal. She picked it up. The cover bore no title. The leather was too worn to show whatever had been embossed on it. She opened it at random and found herself looking at sheet music in a notation she recognized as standard, but with rhythmic markings she had never seen, and lyrics in a writing system she could not place. Not glossolalia as she understood it from the Pentecostal tradition, not any alphabet she could identify, but a character set that had an internal consistency, suggesting it was genuinely phonetic rather than decorative. She photographed several pages and took the hymnal home. She tested the first phrase of the Silent Canticle at her piano, the piece to which the hymnal opened most naturally, which seemed to be the most handled section. The pages there softened with use, while others were stiff. She played the notes. She attempted the written phrase. Her mouth and breath and the mechanics of phonation operated exactly as they should for the production of those specific sounds. No sound came out. Not silence in the conventional sense. She could hear the piano. She could hear the chair creak. She could hear the ambient street noise from the window. She could not hear herself produce the phrase. The air in her lungs moved correctly. Her vocal cords vibrated. She could feel the vibration in her chest and throat. The sound simply did not reach the air of the room. She tried 3 more times. Nothing. She tried singing a standard scale. Her voice returned normal, present, fully audible. She tried the phrase again. Nothing. She brought the hymnal to Thursday's rehearsal. The choir's response to the Silent Canticle was, initially, the entertained mystification of a group of capable musicians encountering a genuinely inexplicable technical phenomenon. They tried sections individually, in pairs, in full group. The result was always the same. Their voices, producing the correct phonations, generated no audible sound. The piano accompaniment was audible. Everything else in the room was audible. Their specific vocal production of this specific piece produced a silence that was not the absence of effort, but the absence of result. Several members wanted to keep trying. This, Clara noted in the rehearsal notes she kept compulsively, was the characteristic response of people who are good at something and have encountered a thing they can't do, not retreat, but insistence. They rehearsed the Silent Canticle for 3 weeks. The first reported effect came in the second week. The silence that followed a session of working on the piece lasted longer than the session itself. Not a ringing, not tinnitus or any conventional auditory after effect, but a quality of quiet that persisted in the body hours after rehearsal. A member named Grace described it in the informal conversation that preceded the following Thursday's session as a silence that has weight. Another member, an accountant named Paul, who was one of the choir's more analytically inclined voices, said it was like the quiet after a very loud noise, except there was no loud noise. The absence itself has a presence. Clara noted this and continued. By the 3rd week, members were reporting that the after silence extended to their interior experience. Not deafness. They could hear external sound normally, but their own thinking, the internal voice that most people experience as the continuous monologue of self-reflection, had become quieter. Quieter in a way that several members described as peaceful initially. 2 of them mentioned it to their partners at home, and their partners noted that they had become, in the preceding days, unusually still. Clara felt it herself. The thought silence arrived first as a quality she associated with deep meditation. The stillness of a mind that has found temporarily the space between thoughts. She'd meditated for years, and this felt continuous with that practice, deeper than it, more reliable. She found herself sitting in the rehearsal space after sessions had ended, simply present in the quiet, without the narrative of her own life narrating itself in the background. She did not connect this to the Silent Canticle. She attributed it to a kind of spiritual receptivity she had been seeking for years. The void hymn was designed with this attribution in mind. The entity that the Silent Canticle had been composed to serve, a god of silence in the oldest and most formal sense, a divine force not merely associated with quiet, but constituted by it, defined by and dependent on the ongoing production of a specific quality of interior emptiness in human hosts, had been dormant since the last congregation capable of performing the piece had dispersed in 1978. The hymnal had been left in the loft. The deconsecration had come 4 years later. The god had waited. The Silent Canticle did not produce audible sound because it was not designed to produce audible sound. It was designed to produce a specific absence in the performers. Each phrase of the canticle, performed with phonetic accuracy and musical attention, replaced a layer of the performer's interior acoustic presence, their inner voice, the continuous self-narration that constitutes the most basic experience of conscious interiority, with void. The replacement was proportional and cumulative. Each rehearsal deepened the absence. The god, with each session, expanded the space available to it in the emptied bodies of 42 singers. The nesting was gradual, like a hermit crab finding a shell that almost fits and working itself in over time. The god's presence occupied more of the vacated interior acoustic space with each rehearsal. By the 4th week, the members of the Harwick Community Choir were approximately 30% occupied. The other 70% was theirs, their thoughts, their daily lives, their relationships and concerns and professional identities. They were not aware of the 30%. They experienced the 30% as peace. Clara scheduled a performance. She did this because the choir had been working on the piece, and the piece was, by every external measure, extraordinary. The visual experience of watching 42 trained singers perform a full choral work with complete technical commitment and produce no audible sound was unlike anything she had conceived before. She framed it in the email she sent to the choir's contact list and the community arts newsletter as an experimental performance piece. Silent Canticle, a meditation on presence and absence, performed by the Harwick Community Choir. The audience numbered, on a Saturday evening in November, 64 people in the Congregational Church's main hall. The choir took their places. The 42 members of the Harwick Community Choir arranged themselves in the standard SATB configuration, filled their lungs, and began the Silent Canticle. No sound came from the choir. The audience sat in the particular attentive silence of people watching, a performance they have been primed to find meaningful. The choir's mouths moved with the specific precision of trained singers, vowel shapes and consonant placements, and breath management all correct, all visible, all evidence of 42 people producing what they understood to be sound. The silence that filled the church was not the silence of no sound. It was a deafening silence, a silence with pressure, with mass, with a specific quality of something arriving rather than something absent. The 64 members of the audience felt it in the same register as the after silence the choir members had been reporting. A weight, a presence in the quiet, a bone-deep stillness that arrived without warning and occupied the body as completely as a sound would. The god was fully present. In the emptied acoustic space of 42 hosts, the god expanded into its full form, distributed, intimate, occupying the specific interior frequency that human consciousness uses to speak to itself. The choir members felt it not as invasion, but as completion, the fullness of a quiet so deep it had no bottom, a silence so complete it was indistinguishable from the most profound peace they had ever experienced. Their mouths kept moving. The notes of the Silent Canticle continued, their lungs filled and emptied with the regularity of singers in full performance. Their faces wore the expressions of people engaged in music that matters to them. The 64 audience members sat in their chairs and felt the silence press against the inside of their ears and their ribs and the backs of their eyes. In the choir loft above the main hall, the hymnal sat on the music stand where Clara had found it, open to the Silent Canticle. The title at the top of the page, the words Clara had read as the piece's title when she first examined it, were not, in the writing system of the original text, a title. They were an instruction, a direction to the performers, in the same technical language that musical notation uses for dynamics and tempo. Open fully, receive fully. Do not close. The choir did not close. The silence continued. She noted the after silence in her rehearsal notes in week 2. She noted it again in week 3. The members' descriptions, the partners' observations about unusual stillness, the quality of interior quiet that 2 separate choir members independently described as peace. She was thorough. She kept good records. She scheduled a performance. The decision to frame it as experimental music, to invite an audience, to stage the void hymn in the best acoustic space available to her, this is the moment I keep returning to. Not because it's reckless in the conventional sense. A choir director who finds extraordinary peace finds extraordinary. A person who has been deepening their own meditative practice through rehearsal, finding the silence increasingly valuable, increasingly peaceful. Of course, she schedules the performance. Of course, she shares it. The God of Silence designed this too. The sharing is part of the mechanism. The performance expands the available host space by 64, produces a public event that can be documented and described and recommended, creates the conditions for a second performance, a third, an annual occasion. The hymnal goes back to the music stand. The choir goes home. They return next Thursday. What I cannot let go of is the instruction at the top of the page. Open fully, receive fully. Do not close. Clara read it as a title. She had no reason to read it as anything other than a title. She had no context in which Silent Canticle in a strange script in an abandoned choir loft should be approached with anything other than the professional curiosity of a musician encountering an interesting unknown. The god had been waiting 40 years for someone with exactly that curiosity. The choir meets every Thursday. The after silence in the week following the performance lasted the full 7 days for all 42 members. The audience has been emailing Clara about the next performance. The church is very good acoustically. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Ilara, and I am your whisperer. I'll be here, waiting for you next time. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. I want to hear your stories. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more. This has been Karma Quietly Whispers. See you soon.